Hey everyone, Toontown back with another Spiral combo video to hold you over while we all constantly check leaks and updates in hopes that Illusion of Chaos is finally released. Anyway, as you can tell by the deck list and the name and probably the video title, this is a combo centered around Arch Nemesis Protoss. Not quite as degenerate as like my Rongo or my Kali Yuga or the full hand loop videos I've shown before, but bear with me because it's a pretty solid strategy. I guess credit can technically go to Kevin OG on this because he's the first one to make a deck list with this, though we've been throwing around the idea of Curious and Protoss, Firewall Dragon, add Protoss to hand for a long time, so I don't really think there's much credit due. Protoss' impact on the game is pretty well documented as a Swordsoul strategy. While the OCG has never been banned, it got banned in TCG because of Swordsoul being oppressive in best of threes, because Protoss is really powerful in games 2 and 3 when you know your opponent's deck and can call the correct attribute. But in best of ones like Master Duel, it's not quite the same. Calling Dark Blind is still really good, especially in Despia format, but in general you're just kind of guessing and hoping it's a good end to your Swordsoul payoff. But Spiral is a little different. See, Protoss and Spiral have a really strong synergy together. Spiral is the best combo deck that, as part of its combo, looks at your opponent's deck to gain information, primarily through Spiral Gear Drone. Spiral's whole gimmick is spying on your opponent's cards. Through the use of Drone, Agent, Helix, and stuff like that, most of the time we should be able to know the opponent is playing a particular attribute, and then lock out that attribute with Protoss and a particular inboard that gets access to the vast majority of attributes. We have access to Protoss, like I said, with Curious plus Firewall Dragon, nothing too crazy, and we are backing up that kind of oppressive Lingering Floodgate with a Tri-Gate combo. The Tri-Gate combo is going to be built off of a Codebreaker engine. If you wanted to skip the Tri-Gate combo and just like throw an IP Masquerade or something, you could cut the Codebreakers in the Tri-Gate and make some room, but it's nice to have an Omni-Negate for spell and trap based decks whenever Protoss isn't really going to be doing a whole lot. We are missing the water attribute. Our full inboard is going to be Tri-Gate plus Appaloosa, co-linked with a Nightmare Cerberus and a Nightmare Phoenix. Combine that with Sleeper on the field and Protoss on the field, that is 5 of 6 attributes, all which will be indestructible. Protoss obviously is indestructible to its own effect, Sleeper will have Last Resort on it, and Nightmare Cerberus will protect your Earth, your Fire, and your Wind monsters from the Protoss from destroying them, and then will lock your opponent out of those attributes. If you wanted to, and I think I have it bookmarked here, you could include an IB in the deck and just replace either your Nightmare Cerberus or Phoenix as the left or right link for the Tri-Gate setup, and then IB would not be destroyed by a card effect while she's linked, and that would be a good water option. You could also use Reproductus if you like committed to Protoss early. I think these are kind of irrelevant. The only water decks that you ever face are Marincess, and you don't see those very often, and I'm probably going to mention that when I'm doing the combo, but this is kind of ancillary, and you kind of, it's incidental, the fact that we have a Fire, an Earth, and a Wind all in the same co-link setup for Tri-Gate, and that they have protection thanks to Nightmare Cerberus. And these are all just good cards to have in your deck in general, whereas IB would just be for water coverage, and I don't think that's worth the extra deck slot. Next up, you'll notice that I've maybe strayed from my usual Gamma Driver Pankratops package. I am just playing Mothman as my Small World bridge, but other than that, this is a fairly straightforward, dangerous Small World shell. And the idea is basically you have one Omni-Negate, you have your Sleeper and your Apo. That's like the that's the basic bog standard core of Spiral, and you have one oppressive card. Right? In the past, I've had Kali Yuga, I've had Rongo, I've had Hand Loops, I've had a Pointer of the Red Lotus, Anti-Spell Fragrance, Hatcheria Beast, whatever you want to list. It's always like Omni-Negate plus something oppressive. And in this case, it's Protoss. It's really hard to out this card when you call the right attribute, because most decks need a special summon. And the decks that don't need special summon, or are water decks, probably can't beat Apo, Sleeper plus Tri-Gate, so you're in the clear. And yeah, that's basically it. Enough jabbering, I guess. Let's do a little combo tutorial so I can show you how it looks and how it functions. Alright, so here we are with the bot game. I'm just going to show you guys the basic Souls plus Quick Fix combo that you likely, try to get to the most often. That said, Spiral isn't exactly the most linear deck, and you're not always going to see this exact combo, but it's a good baseline to understand like what kind of inboard you should get to and how you should construct your board as you're doing it, because there is some complicated link shenanigans going on. So we'll just go ahead and lead off with Spiral Resort, add our Quick Fix, and hey, if your opponent had an Ash here, you have a backup tier for me. Pretty solid. Typically, I will lead off with Magician's Souls. And I'll send Master Plan, because if your opponent has an Imperm or an Effect Veiler and they don't know how Spiral Resort works, what will happen a lot of the time is when you normal summon this Quick Fix, they will get a prompt to use their Imperm, and they'll go, oh yeah, I'll use it now. But then they can only use your Magician Souls. If you lead off with Quick Fix, they won't get the prompt because it will be protected by Resort, and they won't have a legal target. Alright, so we'll go ahead and get our Big Red, our Master Plan. And at this point, you have to make a decision. If your opponent is giving you Ash prompts but has not used it yet, then you might want to chain block this Master Plan by going to Borg Blocker first. At a rescue here. But at this point in the combo, I've used, 1, 2, 3. I'm about to use 4 effects that draw or search me cards to trigger their Ash. You should know if they have an Ash just by prompts at this point. And if they haven't thrown it yet and you think they have it, then you'll chain block your Master Plan. But most of the time they've thrown it by now, and I'm going to operate under the assumption that that is what's happening. So we'll go ahead and go into Helix first. And of course that will trigger our Master Plan in the graveyard. It doesn't change a whole lot in the grand scheme of things how this works out, but like you said, you can go into Borg Blocker here, rescue mission back your Master Plan, make Helix in this zone, and it's not that big a deal. But if they have an Ash and they're saving it for your Helix, then they're just going to save it for your Helix anyhow. Anyhow, we'll go ahead and add our Super Agent, and we'll get Sleeper in a second. Technically, you don't want to do it in this order. You want to use your Helix before you commit to your playing of your second resort to add Sleeper, because if they were smart enough to hold their Imperm for a while, in the there's like a middle ground between when your first resort goes to the graveyard and when your second resort's active, where it's legal to Imperm your Helix, which will turn off its effect, which is really annoying. So, technically don't do it in this order. You should save it, but I'm just doing it so I don't forget. Anyhow, we'll rescue mission our Master Plan. And bring back, throw it over here, get an Assault Mission, of course, so we can discard Assault Mission with Quick Fix, and then search Drone. This is like, this is as linear as Spiral gets. This is like the kind of the core concept you're trying to always get to during your combo. This little play line, and this is like the way you get there isn't always linear, is the main thing I'm trying to get at. We'll go ahead and Assault Mission in our Drone. Activate Drone. Put a monster on top. Just the, Monarch bot, not a big deal. Call monster. And summon our second Quick Fix. Because we've already got Master Plan in rotation, and we're going to be using Selene at this point to get access to another Master Plan rotation, because we actually don't have a way to revive Master Plan outside of Selene right now, which is fairly funny, but that's the way it is. Now, an interesting thing here is you do not necessarily have 3 spells in rotation. Obviously I do, because I opened up with the Resort, I searched a Big Red, and I searched a Resort, but sometimes you just open up with Quick Fix instead of Resort, so you don't have 3 spells. In those instances, you would search Big Red here instead of Last Resort. I'm searching it because obviously I've already drawn Last Resort, but you would search Big Red here and discard it off one of your Quick Fix activations to get a 3rd spell in rotation for your Selene. I don't have to do that, obviously. I've got the 3rd spell, and the majority of the time you will have a 3rd spell, whether it's a Call by the Grave, a Small World, a Terraforming. If you had to, you could just equip a Last Resort to something and rescue it back later or something. It's not that big a deal, but if you're really desperate. But you can add a Big Red, discard Big Red with Quick Fix, and then search Last Resort then. Not going to come up here, though. Anyhow, we can go ahead and go straight into Selene. And of course you want to put Selene in a zone, or in the extra monster zone, where she can summon the Master Plan. If I put her over here, she couldn't summon Master Plan. So go ahead and use her effect. So yeah, this is like another non-linear thing, is like, I did have 3 spells, so I can do this. If you didn't have 3 spells, it would be a slightly different combo, which is, the core of Spiral, not a linear deck. And a rescue mission. And go ahead and link them off for Appaloosa. Alright, we're basically there at this point. So what we really need to do is just kind of get to a curious setup, and that's not too hard. There's a few ways to do it, but the main ones are Dullahan plus Link Kribo plus a Master Plan you revive. So we'll go ahead and get into that. Now you could, if you wanted to, like, make Link Kribo early, link off like a Link Kribo and something for a Borg Blocker, discard Rescue Mission, then use your agent so you can turn your Quick Fixes into live activations for your Basically, you would gain an extra material by going into Dull Hand that way, but you don't really need it in this combo. It's a little superfluous. If I made Blink Creeper here, I'd have to summon Super Agent so I could revive my other Quick Fix and blah blah blah. It's just not worth the effort. Just go ahead and do this. So I am technically losing one of my potential Quick Fix revivals because one of them wasn't summoned for, hasn't used its graveyard effect first. So we'll go ahead and use Dull Hand just because it's not really a big deal. And here we go. And at this point, you would, Super Agent, bring back Quick Fix, make Link Creepo, and that would get you your Last Resort, so you don't worry about Curious. So we'll do that now. Now, technically, I've already drawn Last Resort, so I don't need to worry about my Curious milling it, but we're going to pretend I did. So we'll go ahead and discard Rescue Mission with Quick Fix. Summon Quick Fix. And at this point, you would search your Last Resort, and that'd be fine. So now we just need to make a Curious. And we do that by making Link Creepo right here. And it turns out dark plus dark plus dark makes Curious, and then we'll go ahead and send our Protoss. Now, I actually drew a Small World here. I could have actually skipped Curious by just Small World, banish Tsuchinoko, banish any dark monster, add Protoss, but I don't have to here, and it's good to have the Small World as backup in case your opponent was incredibly patient and waited to use Imperm here. That could happen. Someone could really know how SPYRAL works and they could just wait for Curious, and having the backup is nice, but I did not need it, obviously. And Curious will do some random mills. It doesn't hit anything of note. Actually, it's my other master plan and my other resort, which is funny. Anyhow, we'll go ahead and rescue Missing Back Master Plan. Summon her over here. And Rescue Mission. The order you do this in isn't super important, but what I need to do really is do my Fireball Dragon right now, so I can get into my other plays. Because Fireball Dragon's not going to be on my inboard, and I'll show you why in a second. It's a little cute tactic, but because Fireball Dragon's not going to be on my inboard, I just want to use it early so I can use it as link material. So we'll activate Fireball Dragon's effect to bring back Protoss. If you had tons and tons and tons of link material and you could set up your Cerberus and stuff first, you could bounce multiple cards, but it's not really that integral to the combo. Anyhow, now we just need to go into our Codebreaker plays. And we're kind of leaving Super Agent on here just so we have a way to summon our last Quick Fix if we need it. So activate the Codebreakers. Summon the Codebreakers. Now, technically, this does make you susceptible to Nibiru, but if your opponent has held Nibiru to this point, that's very odd. If they waited until you made Appaloosa, that'd be very silly when you've done 15 summons already. So we'll go to the Codebreakers. You could technically change the order up here if you wanted to and go into the Codebreakers before Firewall Dragon and then use Codebreaker Virus Berserker, a link 3, to make Firewall Dragon as one of your left or right links for your Trigate Wizard if you were skipping Cerberus or skipping Phoenix. But sometimes you'll need to make Phoenix and sometimes you'll need to make Cerberus, so you have all the attributes you need. And it's better to know how to do the combo such that you don't end on Firewall Dragon as one of your co-links because it doesn't give you any protection. So at this point, we just kind of need to make our combo set up. So let's go ahead and use Quick Fix. He's a free material at this point. Get this Rescue Mission in rotation. And summon Quick Fix. And there we go. So now we can just go ahead and go into Trigate Wizard, using a 2. And functionally, this Virus Berserker only represents one material because we don't have any 4s we're going to go into. There's not like a Nightmare Griffin setup or anything. So there we go. We'll go into Trigate Wizard. Go ahead and make Nightmare Cerberus. And we'll use our last Rescue Mission that we just discarded to summon anything. And that will get us to Nightmare Phoenix, and that gets us the full co-link protection. But more importantly, what this represents is basically every relevant attribute of monster besides water. Because as you can see, I'm going to summon this Protoss. I've got plenty of, dumb monsters I can banish. I have plenty of lights. I have a Firewall. Basically, I want to banish Firewall here because if my opponent has Monster Reborn or something, Firewall would be the best monster they could get out of my graveyard. So I'll banish Firewall. And on that same token, I guess, I'll banish Codebreaker. And at this point, I have tons of options. I would discard if I was in this game right now. I don't necessarily have this Ash in the graveyard. It was incidental that it was. So I would normally either banish Helix or Double Helix or Super Agent, leave Drone in because it's kind of useful as a recursion tool. But if you were in the game right now and you had my exact situation, you would banish Ash. In this case, I'll just banish Super Agent. Summon this in defense position. Summon Sleeper. Banishing, you know, the Spiral Resort, the Spiral Big Red. These are, well, actually, you're not necessarily guaranteed to have any of these cards in the graveyard except one Big Red and one Master Plan, right? So the only other cards, I incidentally got this Master Plan, I incidentally got these 2 resorts in the graveyard. If you were in my position, you would just banish one of the resorts. But that's not necessarily true, so in this case, I'd probably just bin Helix. You don't expect your opponent to break your board, so this does kind of hurt your follow-up, banishing all these monsters, but it's not that big a deal. Like I said, in a more realistic scenario, you're curious as to build other cards you can banish. You have more Spiral names in rotation. You can get your other Master Plan in rotation. There's tons of reasons why you'll have extra cards to banish instead of what I showed you there, but I was just showing you, like, all these cards that I banished are cards that are 100% part of the combo. And everything at that point is determinative, and I've also got all this extra material in hand, you know, an extra Big Red if I need it. So, here we are, here's the final board, and the funny and cute thing about this board is, one, it's obviously got a decent setup, it's got a Protos Floodgate, it's got Sleeper, Trigate, Apo. I mean, a lot of people just play Spiral just to make Appaloosa, Trigate, Wizard, and Sleeper, and while I think that's really underwhelming and not really strong enough in modern meta, it's a reasonable payoff. Protos is the big payoff here, and the reason why is this board hits 5 of 6 attributes, and none of them can be destroyed. So Protos itself is obviously a dark monster. It can't be destroyed by card effect. Sleeper is a light monster. It can't be destroyed by card effect thanks to Last Resort. Cerberus and Trigate are both earth monsters. They can't be destroyed by card effect because they are code-linked with Cerberus, and the same is true for Wind Monster in Appaloosa and Fire Monster in Nightmare Phoenix. So this is the very cute optimal end board of the list. If you have extra material, you can make a bigger Appaloosa, I guess. Like, obviously I have this extra Danger and this extra Small World I could have done something with, but, you know, this is kind of like what you expect to end on off just Souls plus Fix no matter what. So here we are. We'll just go ahead and use Protoss, and because I'm feeling cheeky and I have this Nightmare Phoenix, I'll call Fire. And as you can see, Nightmare Phoenix is just fine because it is co-linked with Cerberus, and you can call any of the attributes. Now, as I mentioned in the deck tech, I do not have a water on this end board. If you really, really want to do that, you could make, you could throw an Ib in here and put that in place of Nightmare Phoenix on this end board and call water. But I've played one Marincess player in like my last 30 games, and that was the only water deck that mattered when it comes to preventing special summoning. The only other one was like Umi Control, and I'm not really worried about that deck if I've got just a Sleeper on board, much less this entire setup, so I'm not that worried about any of that. And otherwise, that is the basic Souls plus Quick Fix combo. Now, let's show you a more realistic scenario where I play an actual game, and I have to weave through how to do an unusual combo. Alright, so here are with the real game. This was in Diamond 1 before the rank reset this month, and as you can see, this is a pretty solid combo, and this is going to be, the reason I'm showing this particularly is because I've already shown you the Souls plus Quick Fix combo. This is going to be a 1-for-1 combo. It's a little bit more, a more powerful 1-for-1 combo because I've already drawn the Master Plan, so I can 1-for-1 discard Master Plan, which is an ideal situation. And I do have Called by the Grave backup, which is nifty. So I'm going to 1-for-1, discard my Master Plan, and my opponent does have the Ash Blossom, so an important thing to note, I do have to Call by the Grave this clearly because I have no other extender that's going to get me anywhere. But if I did have a normal summon or even like a Danger besides instead of this Forbidden Droplets or this Call by the Grave, I would not be out of the woods because I could Big Red my Master Plan and then normal summon, add an Assault mission, or add a Rescue mission or whatever, and it'd probably be a Danger would be the more important thing. But then I could Borg Blocker, link off Master Plan, go from there, right? But this, obviously in this particular hand, I have the Call by the Grave, so I'm going to use it. And I had Forbidden Drops instead of a Danger, and that's why, you know, sometimes Forbidden Drops it's bad because you go first and it doesn't do anything for you. But, you know, it's a really great going second card. So we're going to negate their Ash Blossom, resolve 1-for-1, and the typical 1-for-1 play is, even though I've already drawn the Big Red, so obviously when a Search Drone, the typical 1-for-1 play is to Search Drone and normal summon it and go into Helix. Because I've already got the Master Plan in rotation, I can just use this Big Red and summon Master Plan. I'm going to do that anyhow, might as well get it done earlier. Get my Rescue Mission, and I can actually just link these two off for Double Helix. The order you do this doesn't matter. I'm going to have plenty of opportunities to get rid of my Quick Fixes and summon them later. So I'm not really... I could have done Quick Fix plus Master Plan and left Drone on the field. It's just not going to matter, though. then I will get my agent and my resort with my master plan. This resort will obviously eventually get me sleeper. I've stacked an Ash Blossom to the top of my opponent's deck, which I think is ideal because I've already used Called by the Grateful Ash Blossom, so it's useless next turn. And I summon Quik Fix. You always want to summon Quik Fix off Double Helix whenever you have a master plan already in rotation. You don't need a second master plan unless you're doing Kali Yuga shenanigans. The Quik Fix provides +1 material compared to an already in rotation master plan. Obviously, Master Plan provides way more material if you haven't gotten her into rotation, so then she'd be more important. But in this scenario, Quik Fix just provides itself from the graveyard, so it's +1 link material compared to Master Plan. And it makes your rank 1 XZ a little bit more spicy. So go ahead and go into Link Rebo so I can get this Quik Fix in the graveyard, discard a rescue mission, summon a Quik Fix, get Big Red, and then I can rescue mission back my Master Plan, so I can get another rescue mission, get this Quik Fix in the graveyard, you discard a rescue mission, etc., etc. Now, this is an interesting play. Now, I'm not going to say this is wrong, but the way I end up playing the turn, I did not have to do this. I am going to discard my rescue mission with Borg Blocker. That was not necessary, but it's not wrong, and I'll tell you why at the very end of the combo. So remember this when I get to the very end. So we're going to bring in Link Rebo with our Quik Fix. So a Master Plan, get another rescue, so I can discard something of value with my Quik Fix again. Go into Quik Fix, discard rescue, and make Celine, summon Master Plan, and that will be the last time I need to summon Master Plan, because I can get my last mission out of the deck, which was Assault Mission. The funny thing about 1-for-1 is you don't necessarily get any material out of Assault, because you just get to normal summon your drone instead of having to Assault Mission it in, but it still is just a free card in your hand to discard with your Quik Fixes, so it's worth getting no matter what. And we can link all 3 of these off to a Curious, 3 different Dark Monsters, and I don't have to use my Borg Blocker as 2 material. That's it, the dual hand is basically 2 material. So Curious does send the Protos. I do get my other Master Plan in the graveyard, which doesn't really matter, I guess, but nothing really of relevance was hit with Curious. Something to note is it's kind of nice when Curious hits an Ash Blossom or a Gamma if you're playing it, or a Pankratops, just some random monster, because it gives you a different material to banish with Protoss as opposed to, maybe slightly more impactful SPYRAL names. So, I do get to summon my Super Agent now, which turns on both my Quik Fixes. So, Quik Fix number 1, discard the Assault Mission, and do the Firewall Dragon. I get to add the Protoss to my hand. I get to use this Quik Fix to discard the Spare Big Red that I don't need. This is actually one of the reasons why drawing the Big Red wasn't ideal. I was going to get that Big Red no matter what, and I missed out on one of my SPYRAL Quik Fix searches because I had the Big Red in hand already, so I am kind of technically at -1 cards because of it, but it works out. So I go ahead and use my Codebreaker strategy here, or Codebreaker engine, whatever you want to call it. Make the Link 2, summon the 1, make 3, summon the 2 and the 1, and I can go ahead and start constructing my Trigate board. This will get me to a Cerberus. I'm not going to be making any other Link Force besides Appaloosa, so the Berserker is basically just a Link 1. So I'm going to go ahead and make a Appaloosa with those 2. And I can use my last rescue mission on any name, doesn't really matter at this point. And I can go ahead and make my Trigate Wizard. Now, here's the end of the combo, and this is where the weirdness with the Barricade Board Blocker came in. I could have, if I wanted to, use this drone in graveyard, banish either like a Big Red or something, and then return the Super Agent to my hand, and then I could Assault Mission, banish, summon Super Agent, and then link off Super Agent and the Firewall Dragon for Nightmare Phoenix. So that would be the full end board with Nightmare Phoenix instead of using Firewall Dragon just as a left link. I'm not that worried about combat with my opponent being locked under Protoss when they're Despia. I know they're Despia at this point. I saw like a Fright for Patchwork on top of the deck as well as the Ash Blossom. So I'm not that worried about it. So I'm not really interested in banishing both my drone and my Assault Mission when I could just have those cards in rotation if I want them. If that was the case, I should have just not discarded anything with Barricade Board Blocker, and then I could just play my Assault Mission. I'd have it on the field, and whenever Sleeper pops something, I get to draw a free card. So that was a slight miscalculation for me because I knew at that point my opponent was Despia, and this should be how I play my turn. But I was thinking, oh, I'm just going to use the Assault Mission as a +1 material. So that's why the Barricade Board Blocker play wasn't necessarily wrong, but I didn't play it correctly considering how I constructed my end board. But on the bright side, I get to add the Assault Mission to my hand with a Board Blocker effect, so it didn't even -1 me. I just don't have the Assault Mission on the field. Pretty trivial. And here we go. So once your Despia opponent is locked under the Dark Lock with Protoss, they really have very few options. And especially going second, the only real option they have is Super Polymerization, or maybe like a hand with Polymerization, Despia, Light, Dark Monster. Really, really hard to get into Skinny and otherwise, so maybe if they had a Dark Roller no more, that would matter. But with only 4 cards in hand, or 4 cards to hand because Super Poly has to discard. It's not really ideally going to be that way. It's rarely going to happen. My opponent is in a really odd situation, even with Super Poly. So they have 2 options for Super Poly, Mood Dragon or Perskinion. If I had made Nightmare Phoenix, they wouldn't even have Mood Dragon because every single monster would be a different attribute besides Trigate Wizard and Nightmare Cerberus. So I guess they could get rid of my Trigate Wizard, but then they'd be stuck under Aetho, Protos, Sleeper. My opponent has to get rid of Protos. They cannot win the game as Despia if you just keep calling Dark with Protos. There's nothing they can do. Like, the only thing they can really do to combat Protos is Super Poly it away. So what's their option? Well, they're going to summon a Despia monster, set it in this case, and get rid of my Firewall Dragon to break my Trigate Link and my Protoss, because they have to get rid of Protoss. Otherwise, they just keep losing to Call Dark. That said, if they do this, they're kind of in a rough situation because they can't answer Sleeper. So you say, why don't they use Sleeper instead of Firewall Dragon to make Perskinion? That would work. They would get rid of Protoss, Sleeper, and their Despia monster make Perskinion, and then I would Trigate Wizard banish their Perskinion, and they would have no threat on board. Their hope is they can summon Perskinion, attack over my Appaloosa, and I don't Sleeper it, I guess. I don't know. There's just no hope. Their only real hope would have been a second Super Poly and having one more card in hand instead of using Ash. That's really their only hope. Or maybe like in this particular instance, they're going to use the Tragedy to add a card. So now if they had a second Super Poly, they could do something maybe, like Super Poly for Mood Dragon, but it's just not really a realistic situation. So they're going to make Perskinion, and I don't really care because I have a Sleeper on board with Last Resort. And so this is why Protoss on its own isn't really enough to beat Despia, but Protoss backed up by an otherwise normal Spiral inboard of Trigate, Sleeper, Aetho is definitely enough to beat pretty much anything these guys have. They drew the Ash Blossom, so I'm just going to negate it with Appaloosa, and at this point they're just super dead. I recycle my drone, stack their deck with another useless card, go into Axico Talker, and they are dead on board. And they go ahead and concede. So there you go, a slightly less standard combo using a card that you really need to know how to use correctly in 1-for-1. That's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and get to the conclusion. Alright gang, here's the deck one last time, and I hope now you understand just why Spiral Gear Drone is actually Protoss' best friend and not Swordsoul. I just love the inherent synergy of abusing Protoss' effect with Spiral's information gathering, playstyle, gimmick, whatever you want to call it. Another interesting tidbit to note about Protoss in this particular list is that it is easily searchable with Small World. It's a dark monster with no other similarities to anything in the deck, so you can often just skip the entire Curious line, maybe even set up an unused Firewall Dragon as another interaction if you open the full combo and just have a spare Small World hanging around. Go search Protoss, summon it very easily, go to town on them. And that's really it, folks. I hope you enjoyed the deck tech, tutorial, and the gameplay. And now for that classic YouTuber spiel. If you did enjoy the video, why don't you give me a like, toss a comment down below, or subscribe to the channel. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that Spiral game. Thanks for watching. See you later.